Who do you think are some of the most influential artists in terms of modern rap music over the past few years? Think more specifically in the SoundCloud scene. People like Trippie Redd, losoe, vert, and playboi carti are all solid answers, along with many other artists of course. But what if I told you that there was a collective heavily influencing the sounds of these artists from the shadows over the past few years? Well, such a collective does exist. A collective that has worked on some of the most influential projects as of late and has single-handedly popularized a new wave of music. But to understand the impact of this collective, we have to rewind to when I first discovered them. Back in March of this year, I embarked on a journey to discover who created rage beats. If you aren't familiar with rage beats, just think Miss the Rage by Trippie Redd, and if you're not familiar with that song, then you're probably living under a rock. Anyways, as I researched for that video, I soon began to realize that no one person created that production style. It was a combination of many years of work put in by rappers and producers that could honestly be traced all the way back to the beginning of rap if you really tried, and a lot of people misunderstood what I was saying in the video, making it a little bit controversial. So to avoid controversy, I do want to emphasize the word influence, not started. I'm not claiming anyone started anything, I'm just saying they had a big influence, like their sound inspired others. But when I was looking into the most influential songs and albums for that sound, I found something kind of crazy. I think we can all agree that albums like Whole Lotta Red and Trip at Night were very influential to the rage sound, and as I was looking at these albums, I kept seeing the same names pop up in the production credits. So after looking into the producers a little more, I found out that many of them were in the same collective called Hyperpop and worked on some of the earliest rage songs. And those producers were Starboy, Outtatown, Gabe, Losoe, and Art Dealer. I was so surprised to find out that such low-key producers had worked on such influential songs. A lot of us are familiar with some big name producers such as maybe Pierre Bourne and Molly Raw, especially because they're iconic tags, and Metro Boomin too. I forgot to say him when I was recording. But these producers don't tend to use tags too often, so it's kind of hard to pick up on who they are. I thought it was the craziest discovery, and I felt like I was like the first person to figure this out, even though I most definitely was not. But at the time, I felt like I had just discovered fire or something. Unless you're super into this style of music or you're actually in the industry, you probably would have never known that a collective named Hyperpop was a big force in moving the modern rap sound forward. But what is hyperpop? Why is that their name? How did they get to the point where they're working with such huge artists? Have they produced any other widely influential songs? Well, to understand that and learn a little bit more, we have to rewind even further. Before 2019, producers like Pierre Bourne, Molly Raw, and many more had been ushering in a fresh style of beats with lots of synths and bouncy 808s. Around that time, a producer from the Netherlands by the name of Outtatown had been working his way into the industry. He had produced tracks like Icy by Young Thug, Shorty by Juice WRLD and Future, and Death Note by Lil Nar. He had also been regularly collaborating with another producer from the Netherlands by the name of Starboy. In 2019, Starboy had produced songs like Bop by DaBaby, You Deserve It by Trippie Redd, and Rockstar by Lil Keed. At this point, although they were making great beats, they were pretty similar to the other sounds that were already out. And in 2019, the two of them decided to form a collective together by the name of Hyperpop. Contrary to the name, they don't actually make hyperpop. Outtatown and Starboy would then recruit producers Gabe, Art Dealer, Losoe, and Brandon Finessin. Some of the new recruits were much more established than others. For example, Gabe had been in the game for a long time. He met ASAP Yams, who helped usher him into the industry in 2013, and he began working on music videos. Since then, he's worked on videos like Famous by Kanye West, Shaba by ASAP Ferg, and Sneakin' by Drake. He also produces and makes music, and he even collabed with Lil Peep and has a catalog of his own songs. Art Dealer, on the other hand, is a member of playboi carti's Opium label and is his creative director. He's worked on music videos, handles Carti's merch, does visuals for his shows, and produced the classic song Long Time. Brandon Finessin was a member of Working on Dying, another very talented and important production-based collective. So Gabe, Art Dealer, and Brandon Finessin already had solid careers in the industry before joining this collective. Once the collective was established, they got to work on a very important and anticipated album for 2020. Can anybody guess what the album was? You guessed it, or maybe not. It was Eternal Atake. This album is when I think the Hyperpop collective really began to establish their sound. Like I said, their sound has been a gradual change, but this album had some pretty unique beats. Songs like Futsal Shuffle, Celebration Station, and Venetia were produced by some of these producers and featured EDM melodies with lots of plucks and synths. Some people consider these beats to be hyperpop, and while I wouldn't necessarily consider them hyperpop, I would say they were a little bit poppier than regular rap beats. Again, although this wasn't groundbreaking, it was definitely a little bit different and the beginning of a newer sound that they would continue to craft. Brandon Finessin later left the collective, but he worked on a lot of the Eternal Atake songs, Sanguine Paradise, and also produced Sasuke along with Outtatown. The collective would also go on to produce many of Future and Uzi's collabs like All Bad, Marnie on Me, and Patek. After a lot of their work with Future and Uzi, they would begin adding elements to their beats that would resemble what we now know as rage beats. As I said, they worked on many songs on Whole Lotta Red like Go to the Moon, Meh, Sky, Over, Control, and more. As well as working on those tracks, they also produced many songs for other underground artists, and they have also worked very closely with Ken Carson. They've produced many of his songs over the years. And also another fun fact, Outtatown, a member of Hyperpop, worked on the Family Ties beat. So as we can see, this collective has actually worked on some of the most influential albums over the past 2 years. Recently, they've been throwing around the word and the name Adrenaline, so maybe they're changing their name, or maybe something's going on with that, or it's an album, I'm not sure. But regardless, the biggest takeaway from this video, in my opinion, is that there's a lot more low-key people in the industry that may not be super clout hungry, or they might not put tags on their beats, but people like this are huge influences in the industry, whether you know it or not, and I'm sure there's many more people just like them. If you want to see me go more in detail about rage beats in particular and how this collective really influenced that sound, you can click this video right here.